we have to be neutral for people to trust us, because our integrity is paramount in whether or not people believe the messages that we're speaking about. And I don't take any money from any paddle company ever, especially for reviews.
Why don't you just create a paddle based off of what you know?
I don't want to do that because of...
Today, I'm joined by someone who's probably tested more paddles than anyone else on earth, John Kew. If you're deep into pickleball gear like I am, you've definitely watched his reviews. Super in-depth, super honest, and super helpful. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you, John Kew. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Jack. Good to see you, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you too. I know we just filmed something for your pod as well that I'm going to link in the description. And I had a blast doing that, but now it's my time to pick your brain apart.
I love it.
So yeah, as we know, John Kew Pickleball, one of the most notorious paddle reviewers on YouTube. Have you been doing this for how long would you say?
It's going on 2 years now. I mean, it's been a wild ride. 2 years in pickleball is, an eternity almost. But I got in early with the pickleball reviews, and I put one up at the end of 2023 and never thought I'd go anywhere, and put a few up after that. And now it's my full-time gig.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So how long did it take for you to turn it in or like really realize the potential of it?
Yeah, I had no intention of making any money with it, and it was just a passion. So I had a drum channel for years. We were just chatting about that before. I never made a dime from that because I played copyrighted material, so it was not monetizable. And, I did like really progressive metal drumming and covers, right? So Tool and that kind of stuff. And big followers, like 65,000 subscribers and that sort of thing. So I knew my way around YouTube, and I just got into pickleball for the same reason. Just expected to do something fun. I knew YouTube, so I started the John Kew Pickleball channel. My drum channel was also called John Kew. And started doing kind of paddle analyses. And, eventually it just kind of turned into, when I get commissions from people who use my code for discounts if I recommend a paddle, and that works out. And there's also the YouTube viewership money that comes in. So my 30-year career in archaeology, I still am an archaeologist. I still work on call for the company I've been working with for a while now, but my full-time gig now is pickleball. And, I follow my passion with this. I love talking about paddles and helping people get fit with paddles and exploring paddle technology, exploring the limits of where can we go with paddle technology, including testing and certification, and I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it seems like you kind of pioneered it. At least with a lot of these paddle reviewers, especially in pickleball, the innovation is just constant. There's constant pressure towards the next big thing, whether it's going to be a fad or whether it's actually going to take off. And you being able to actually front run that is awesome. Would you say you're naturally curious, or would you consider yourself, because you review paddles or just everything in your life, would you consider yourself a nerd?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Huge
nerd. So I do have a very kind of curious aspect to my personality and analytical. So my wheelhouse in archaeology was stone tool analysis. So I was a Paleolithic archaeologist who analyzed stone tools with microscopes and measurements and databases and everything. So I transferred that into pickleball, the analytical side of things. And that was naturally my wheelhouse there. And turns out there are a lot of like-minded people who want to know a lot about the nitty-gritty details about the paddle, not only its dimensions, how it plays, how the dimensions, play into how it plays on the court as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially amateurs need someone to watch to actually figure it out, because typically for them, it's just like feel and then the specs that they see on the paddle when it's on the wall at Dick's, you know? Yeah. And you actually provide more insight than that. Do you like being known as a paddle reviewer in general?
Yeah, I don't mind it. My colleagues in archaeology were like, what are you doing? Pickleball. I'm like, what? You're a pro? I'm like, no, not even close, but I review paddles. And they're like, okay, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, I think it's kind of it was the Wild West in pickleball, gear and technology when I started, and Chris Olsen and Braden were there before me, so we all three together, as well as Will Chang, kind of worked our way through the landscape and found a path. And I think it's exciting to get in early in a sport when, nobody really knows how to measure the metric qualities of a paddle and how those reflect the performance. So we've kind of fleshed some things out. Like Braden was the first to use twist weight. He popularized twist weight, which correlates with sweet spot. That's a big deal. Before him, Chris was measuring RPM, and he brought in the graffiti machine to measure swing weight. Huge deal also. I popularized the kind of the pop and power metrics, because paddles hit differently with full swings versus shorter poppy swings. And we've been consistently building on this data that we started gathering a couple of years ago now. And I think it's very helpful. And, the people I want to help are the people that want to be fit with a paddle and want to come to one of our websites and sort the columns on a database by power and then figure out, okay, swing weight's a big deal, twist weight's a big deal. Why do these matter? And just help people make more intelligent decisions about paddles.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah. Your entire group is like the entire, like what you said, Chris, Will, you guys are basically the scientists of the sport, like providing the data and doing all of the research, the hypotheses, and then actually, taking it out on the field and showing the audience and the masses what this stuff actually means. And, because if you're talking, I feel like, you would probably know better than me, but if you're talking to an amateur and you mention swing weight or twist weight, they may not, it may just go completely over their head.
Right.
So you being able to actually break it down into a digestible way of absorbing it is definitely vital for most people.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's so many metrics and attributes, and it's easy for me to get carried away because I have a core viewership that watches the paddle reviews, and they know a lot. They're very intelligent, and it's almost too easy for me to speak to them and kind of exclude people just getting into it. But I want to be able to, and I'm consciously working to make it multi-level. So you can jump into one of my videos as first time pickleball player and be like, all right, I know what he's talking about. And if you want to scratch beneath the surface, then there's a lot there to go about.
So are you trying to broaden your horizon just by making your videos, more like like explaining stuff and then going in depth rather than just say, for example, assuming that they know everything?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I never want to veer off the path that got me in the first place and my passion in this, and that is, the metrics and the data and really deep diving into paddle performance as well as gear performance. But I also want to make it palatable for everybody and introduce people to this world, because it does make a difference, and play style, your play style, being fit with a good paddle to match your play style is important. And knowing which paddles are durable to save you money and that sort of thing, I think is all important stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually one of the things that I enjoyed best watching your video was the durability. I think a lot of people forget about that. As a pro, I'm kind of I don't really think about that.
Yeah.
But when I was grinding and a paddle lasted literally a month and I had to pay for another paddle, that would have been huge in order to figure out how durable a paddle is.
Sure.
And your videos are very, very well thought out. Take for example, the one that you recently did with Gabe a month ago. It was, it was like a typical podcast, but not only did you talk about, the paddles and, the pro side of things, but also you were on the court with him breaking down his drill or warm-up routine. And then you mix that all into one video, which is a very unique approach to the typical, podcaster dialogue with someone.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. And that's another way I think that you've kind of transformed the typical way of talking to people on YouTube, especially in the space. Now your videos, how often do you try to post, and how often, like what's your typical timeline for a project? Are they bigger, more like this is going to take a month, but we're going to put it out as best as possible, or you try to do like once a week?
Yeah. So my bottleneck up to very recently was the editing part of this. So I would record videos. I did everything myself, record the videos, script everything, come up with the concepts, and then sit down at the computer and edit everything. And the editing took me a long time. So I was limited to about one video, sometimes two videos a week. But I recently hired an agency that does editing, and that's freed up a lot of my time to focus on what I'm good at. I mean, I love the editing. It's a creative outlet, but it's not what I should be spending most of my time on. So, coming up with the ideation and executing the interviews and the podcast and everything else. And clearly my core and what I love doing best are the paddle reviews. Those take the longest. We have to hit with the paddles for at least 2 weeks solid before we can talk about them intelligently. And we're I'm recording all of these data. I even have a PB Core Canon at home. So I have a laboratory in my basement where I'm actually getting the similar results to what the agencies are doing. Mine's not as high tech as theirs, but I'm getting replicable results that I can compare to theirs. So that's my next frontier. We can talk about that later. Long-winded answer to the two. I freed up some time by hiring editors. I love to put more effort into the ideation and stay true to my core, which is the paddle reviews. And I'm looking to get out about 2 videos per week on average these days. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, your quality of video is very, very high end still. And something that I did at the beginning was just focus on quantity and now shift over more to quality. And so seeing the fact that you can still post 2 high quality videos a week is very, very impressive, especially being on this side of it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I still can't do that with my current bottlenecks. But let's talk about, now since this is your full-time job, you're in a unique position where, this is a legitimate platform and businesses and companies want access to it. And I assume a lot of companies are throwing money your way, but you need to find a way to pay the bills, but also remain 100% honest and truthful to your viewers. Mm-hmm. And this applies to a lot of paddle reviewers, or just any reviewer, say. For example, like MKPHD is who I watch for everything tech related, and he's the king of not taking one single sponsorship. Mm-hmm. How do you find the line between what you should do with companies, when you should take money, but also make sure that your viewers get the honest truth with no coding?
Right. Great question. And I don't take any money from any paddle company ever, especially for reviews. We do have sponsors on the podcast. I look to sponsors for like clothing apparel. Centerline Athletics was one of our sponsors. Babolat Footwear sponsors a segment on one of my shows. I draw the line, though, with paddle companies that sell paddles. And, I wouldn't take one from, Yola, for example, for like advertise Yola paddles. I think that's a conflict of interest if I want to be objective and neutral as a paddle reviewer. So all of my paddle reviews, never do I take any money to do a review. I never promise a review. People send me paddles and I'm very upfront with them. I'm like, I'll try them out, but can't promise a review. Can't promise a positive review. If I do put out a review, it may or may not be negative. And I think that's a fascinating spot that pickleball is in. And I don't see it in any other sport where there's an independent group of gear reviewers, And it's curious to me why that is. And it just kind of developed that way with me and Chris and Braden and Will originally, and now a bunch of others are in the space. But there's a culture of, we all know that we have to be independent and we have to be neutral for people to trust us, because our integrity is paramount, and whether or not people believe the messages that we're speaking about. So it's just been fantastic, and that we've been being able to do this in a neutral way without having to, seek out sponsorships that might create a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever, what are the creative avenues for you to make up for that, not loss of income, but, just not taking that income? Is it through more affiliates, or through what you said, like with clothing sponsors or other sponsors? Or how do you kind of get creative with how to make your money?
Yeah. I think, a lot of this goes out to the core viewership of my channel, of Chris's channel, of Braden's channel. They appreciate the hard work that goes into these paddle reviews, and they reciprocate. They get a discount by using our code, but they'll use our codes to purchase the paddles, right? Because we help them And I would never want to be in a spot where I'm not providing value to the viewership, right? But we have a loyal following for each of our channels, and it's, people share their passion for Chris and myself. We all have common viewers, but they like I said, they watch our videos and they appreciate the value we bring, so they'll use our codes to get themselves a discount. I mean, they could also use any other code. They could use the code that pops up on the website when you go to buy a paddle. Mm-hmm. It's a 10% code, but they use our codes because they know that we get a commission with that, and that has been the number one way that we've been able to make this a viable career path. And then right now we're all kind of working to build up supplementary forms of income as backups and safety nets and that sort of thing, just in terms of the sponsorships. And as the YouTube channels grow, you get a little bit more money. And as you know, I don't think people realize that you don't make a lot of money from views on YouTube at the level of Pickleball's at right now. Yeah. Maybe Mr. Beast level, they make a ton of money, but I mean, for a few thousand views, that's not much, right? Yeah. But it's passive income, and as long as the viewership is still there on older videos, they accumulate as you put more and more videos out. So that's actually become a fairly reliable income source too, is just the YouTube views.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. And you and your tight-knit circle of paddle reviewers remind me of like the PayPal Mafia. Like, you guys would you say your viewers are very, very tight-knit with just one paddle reviewer, or do they tend to cross-pollinate with, like, if somebody were to watch a paddle, or if somebody wants to buy a paddle, are they going to watch all 4 paddle reviews, or are they just going to watch John Kew's?
I think a lot of people do watch. They love seeing the subtle differences that me and Chris and Braden and others have. So I think they watch a bunch of different ones. And I think they also appreciate that we're all good friends, all of us paddle reviewers. And there's no animosity and weird competition between us. And it's been that way since the beginning. And I'm so glad that people with great personalities and characters like Chris and Braden and Will were there and kind of established the culture that we've all been using since that time. So I think my point there is that I think people pick up on that. And, I don't think that there's a hardcore John Kew group who doesn't like the Chris Olsen paddle reviews, but we each have our own personalities and our own take on things that I do think appeals to certain different segments of the population who is interested in the paddle landscape. So, Chris is, we're just different. And I think people respond to that in good ways.
Got it. Yeah. And a lot of these, take for example, like USAP or governing bodies, or just the companies that paddle test. Have they ever reached out to you, or have you ever considered working with them? Or do you work with them, just consult with them, or do anything like that? Or do you like to remain quite independent?
No, I think the value of my basement lab setup is that I am independent and I'm not beholden to the paddle companies. They're not my clients. So I can publish, my results, and I don't have them published yet. I'm still working through all the methodology, and it's vast. Like shooting a paddle with the ball with the cannon and measuring inbound and outbound velocity would be easy, and it's not. There's so much math and craziness to the methodology behind this, but I've got it dialed in. Almost there. I've got 20 paddles that I've tested already, and I've hired my stepson to do this while I'm away, and he's getting more and more data. So eventually I'm going to have all this in my database. And the beauty of this is that people can look at my data and PPL, the laboratory for the UPAA, and Element Space and Defense, the laboratory for USAP. They can't release these numbers because these paddle companies are their clients, right? I can, because I have this independent relationship. I think there's going to be a lot of interest and value in knowing where the paddles stack up. Wouldn't it be neat to know if your paddle's close to the limit, the 0.43 limit with the USAP or the 0.385 limit with UPAA, and just to compare, like, what is the firepower, and with a more objective way than what we have been doing, which is measuring serve speed and punch volley speed with the radar gun.
Got it. How difficult was it to get that cannon shooter in your basement?
So it's a long story, and my wife is very patient with me. The cannon looks like a military grade cannon, and it's not, like I said, it's not as fancy as the one that PPL uses or the one that USAP uses. They have the ability to. It's a performance cannon, and the one that PPL uses is a piston cannon. They put the ball on a pedestal, and there's a little piston that shoots the ball out. It travels in a straight line with no spin, and they're able to actually determine which part of the ball is going to hit the paddle and at a precise location on the paddle at a precise speed. So they hit the ball. They use the Vulcan ball with holes, a regular pickleball, and they're able to hit between the holes every time. You'd be surprised the difference in outbound velocity of a ball bouncing off a paddle when it's hit between the holes versus on the holes. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can feel it if you press your thumbs into an X40 or Vulcan ball. On the hole, you're able to really compress the ball very easily. You go between the holes, it's a lot firmer. And that firmness translates into a much poppier outbound velocity. So I don't have that capacity. I have a traditional air cannon, and even though it looks like a military grade cannon, it shoots like one too. It's still more crude than what they're using at the agencies. So I use the same ball that USAP uses, which is the Franklin ball with no holes. So before they cut the holes, they'll send all these balls to USAP for their testing, and I get them from Franklin also. And that just allows me a little more consistency with the ball, so I don't have to worry about hitting between the holes because I can't,
I see. Yeah.
with regularity.
Yes.
So I use that ball. It does, it doesn't behave exactly like a ball with holes, and in some ways that's good. In some ways it's bad. It's good in the sense that it's consistent. It's bad in the case that I've got to assume that it's behaving more or less similar to what a ball is going to play on the court with holes. But yeah, so these are some of the hurdles that I'm up against with this home laboratory.
Super unique. I didn't even think about that. Like, it reminds me of when there was this ramp on a golf course green, mm-hmm. and they placed the ball every single time, and like 2 made, 2 went left, 2 went right,
I've seen
and it's the same exact shot.
Yep.
Seems like that's very similar to when the ball makes contact, whether it hit the hole or whether mm-hmm. it hit the plastic.
Yeah.
So it seems like the reason we miss drives is not because we suck. Seems like it's because the ball.
I was about to say that. Like, it makes me feel better about my horrible pickleball game. I don't know how pros like yourself are so consistent. Like the rallies that go 100 shots or more, is just like, how is nobody missing? Because that ball is not what you expect in terms of performance for a professional sport. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of variability.
Yeah. So this could get too deep and too nerdy, but instead of hitting the ball flat, if you add spin, mm-hmm. will it remove that inconsistency?
That's a really good point. And I think, yes, there's spinning the ball. You're going to brush on the ball, and it's going to slide a little bit on your paddle, and it's going to not just hit right in between the holes or on the holes. It's going to kind of average out holes versus in between holes. So I think that's a way to mitigate some of the variability in the ball response off the paddle.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, kudos to you for like truly being the scientist behind all of this. I actually never even thought about it like that whatsoever. Now let's talk about a little bit more about your channel. Where do you get inspiration from for your videos, your editing style, just the way you talk, the way you script? Mm-hmm. Do you go to other industries or watch other channels, or do you just sit down, note for an hour? How do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, I've been very lucky, and I just kind of did this organically. I have background in analytics as an archaeologist. I also taught a bunch of college courses. So, kind of my online demeanor as I'm presenting a paddle review comes from years of teaching. And it's weird for me because I used to hate being in the public eye. Like, going up in front of a class the first time to teach it, I was a nervous wreck, and I had to overcome kind of those fears. And that's always been kind of one of my tenets, is to give yourself the butterflies on a regular basis, because it helps you overcome hurdles. So that was one of my main hurdles when I was younger, is not just being stage shy, and now it's not a problem for me. That's an aside. So, my background, I think, helped me move into this niche that I'm in pickleball. And I didn't go into any other videos and kind of copy outside of pickleball. It just kind of organically transformed into what the channel has become. And luckily, and the path I've been on, there's been an audience for it. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow. Yeah. And so how has it been working with paddle companies? I mean, you have a unique relationship where they send you it for free, but they don't expect anything. What are some of the craziest requests or stories that you've had, or what companies do you enjoy working with?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like 99% of the paddle companies are wonderful to work with. There have been hiccups here and there, and sometimes we'll get an email that will laugh. So like the email says like, hey, we'll send you a free paddle in exchange. You review the paddle. And all of us are at this point are like, man, our basements are so full of paddles and we don't do that. Like we don't take an exchange for anything, so it's kind of a funny request, but don't get me wrong. I'm super grateful that the paddle companies are willing to send us paddles to test. I have bought paddles before to test and review. It's not always free, but for the most part, they realize that there's value in it, even if it's a negative review. And I really appreciate the companies who are willing to take constructive criticism and change their paddles, or even just be like, I don't agree with you, but that's fine. Who don't take it personally. And I know it's got to be hard for the companies who invest money and R&D into the paddles, and then they get a reviewer that doesn't like it. It must be, a ego blow. But I've been duly impressed with several companies who I've given, me and others have given, either neutral or even neutral reviews heard, I'm sure. And they don't take it personally, and they move on. And sometimes they use that as an inspiration to innovate in different ways, or take our recommendations and come out with a better paddle. And that way it's fulfilling for me, because not only do I feel like I have a better relationship with this paddle company, in a good way, in a neutral way, but also helping progress the paddle landscape by giving ideas to paddle companies to innovate.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, just the first thing that my mind goes to is I watched this very unique YouTube video where two rappers and two producers each had to make a song. So the rappers had to make the beat and then rap, and the producers had to produce a beat and then rap over it. And we'll see which one was better, like more independent, which one could do the other one's job better. Seems like, why don't you just create a paddle based off of what you know? Or why don't you go hop on board with a paddle company that you trust and then front run everything over there? Is that something that you want to do, or you just enjoy the position that you're in?
Yeah, I totally enjoy the position I'm in, and doing that would preclude me from continuing as a paddle reviewer, at least for that particular paddle. Clearly, I wouldn't make a paddle and then review it and be like, this is the most amazing paddle in the world, right? I mean, I do, that is a curiosity that I would love to explore maybe at some point in my career, is can I make the best paddle, or at least what I think would be the best paddle for the majority of players, but at this point, I don't want to do that because it is kind of a conflict of interest, right? And I don't want to team up clearly with any one paddle company. We have to really be careful by maintaining our independence as paddle reviewers at this point. I don't intend to change that anytime soon.
Yeah, I've had this talk with people that if paddle reviewers teamed up and made a paddle, it would be the best paddle on the market by not even close.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. For sure. So we've seen a crazy tech boom in pickleball the past 2-3 years, ever starting with the original Electrum paddle,
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah, crazy grit, now EVA foam, thermoforming. What do you think are some of the biggest innovations in pickleball that you've seen? And what are some of the ones that you think are here to stay versus kind of here to go?
Yeah. Let me give you kind of a brief history of where we are here, how we got to today. So let's go back to the Electrum Model E that you mentioned, right? That was the first raw carbon fiber paddle. And that's when I kind of got into pickleball. I was in there a little before then. And that paddle was just like, I love this thing. Even though it's a pillow, you just get a wicked spin. There were pros playing singles with the Model E. Do you remember that? Like
That's right when I started coming back. Yeah.
Today it would be impossible to take a Model E out on a court and compete in singles at the pro level. But anyway, the spin was great, and I was curious, like, what in the world is this raw carbon fiber? And it took me a while to figure it out. And it's actually you're not hitting raw carbon fiber. It's it's an impression used by a peel ply, and what you're hitting is epoxy placed over unidirectional carbon fiber. So it's a kind of an industry standard to call that raw carbon fiber, even though it's a misnomer. It's not raw carbon fiber. Okay. So it took us a while to figure that out. It still today is one of the best performing textures you can put on a paddle, and most durable. It does lose its grit. It's epoxy. It breaks down after thousands of hits. So I'd say that one of the first revolutions was that raw carbon fiber. It replaced grit texture. Like, remember the Franklin, max grit paddles? You'd hit with it for 2 weeks and it'd be totally baby smooth, lose all its spin. And that was the industry standard at that time. So raw carbon fiber came along. They last, for some people, a year or more. For others who hit more frequently, 3 months, sometimes less, right? Before your spin goes away. So that was a innovation. And then in 2024, thermoforming was a big deal. And then we had the arms race all through 2023, 2024, how to make a paddle more and more powerful. The agencies caught on. Like, some of these delaminated core crush paddles are hitting like bazookas. We can't have this, it's going to ruin the sport. So then they brought in PB core, so the coefficient of restitution, to measure directly instead of indirectly the power of a paddle. And we're still going through the early stages of the learning curve of PB core. I say indirectly versus directly. Indirect was the deflection test, right? So press on the face of the paddle, how far does it deflect with a certain amount of poundage? And that's going to indirectly tell you how powerful the paddle is. That's not the best method now that we have PB core. So arms race. And now what we're seeing in 2024, another big kind of path that certain companies took that was innovative, I'd say, was the layup. So by layup, I mean the surface layers of the paddle underneath the grit. And typically it's carbon fiber. And the standard has been 3 layers of carbon fiber oriented at 90 degrees. So 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 0 degrees. Fiberglass made a comeback in 2024. It used to be that all the paddles were faced with fiberglass, but they started using it in different forms than the layup. So it would be carbon fiber, fiberglass, carbon fiber. Fiberglass in the middle gives you a little bit more poppiness to the paddle, but the carbon fiber mutes it a little bit. So if you ever played with a fiberglass top on a paddle, it doesn't feel that great. It's just too uncontrollable. But put it in the middle, it takes away some of that harshness, and the carbon fiber mitigates some of the poppiness. But if you dig down deep enough with a hard enough hit, it can provide the power, a little bit more power than all carbon fiber paddle. Put it on the third layer down. Now you have even more muted power, but with really full swings, you can dig down and get that dwell into the fiberglass and get more spring with big surge, stuff like that. So they started playing around with where to put the fiberglass. Kevlar was introduced at that time. I think now that we're capping power with a objective, direct way to measure power with PB core, I think the next frontier in innovation is going to be forgiveness of the paddle. And I welcome that, because I feel like, some of these early paddles that were the most powerful paddles, they hit great at the size of a quarter in the middle of it. But as soon as you get outside of that, it just died, right? Yeah. And people's game suffered as a result. But if you can make a paddle that's whatever power people love, not everybody has to have the most power, but they all have a oversized sweet spot. And how awesome would that be for rec players' games, for pros' games? Everybody needs a bigger sweet spot, no matter what your level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think we should cap power? If you are, say you're the regulatory body, is there a reason to cap power?
Yeah, 100%. I used to be more kind of, what's the word for it? Can't think of it right now, but I used to be a lot more lenient with regards to capping power. Like, does it really matter? Like, the game's going to evolve no matter what. But I definitely think that pickleball is uniquely situated that power could totally run the sport. Like, not only at the amateur level, but also at the pro level. At least change it into something that probably we don't want. So we're standing 14 feet away from our opponents for most of the time on the court, and human reaction time and anticipation can only take you so far. And I did a little bit of background when I was measuring pop levels of different paddles, and I forget the exact numbers, but there is a human reaction time limit, obviously. And the paddles around the end of last year, the most powerful paddles, exceeded that that reaction time. And we start to see people take advantage of that. If you can hit it hard and body bag somebody in front of you, that's the end of the point, right? And we don't necessarily want that to be the predominant way of winning a point in pickleball. Now, clearly the body bag is just something that's a valid way to do it. But if you make it too easy, nobody's going to want to watch it anymore, but it's going to want to play it, right? Who wants to be a target of whoever can hit the ball the fastest? You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that?
Agreed. I think capping power is necessary, because one of the predictions I had going into 2025 and one of my prediction videos was that a pro player gets hit in the eye, they lose sight in that eye, and it causes a mass wave of pulling back on power paddles. And I hope that doesn't happen. I said in the video, there's probably around a 30% chance that does happen, or simply on a third shot drive. They hit a drive that's so fast, clips off the net. The person defending can't get their paddle on it. It's them straight in the eye. It's all over the news. That's all pickleball is talking about now. It's all every sports industry is talking about for a split second. And because of that, then regulatory bodies cut back on power because they see it.
Yeah.
I know right now it's very tough because it's like, okay, it's changing the strategy. But changing the strategy versus somebody just lost their eyesight are two completely different ways to, kind of pull back. So I hope that doesn't happen, but I don't want it to happen. Yeah. So that's why I think we should pull back on power, especially at the amateur level. I mean, shoot, if somebody pulls out a 3S or a mod and they're ripping serves and then ripping drives, like, just say like a gym bro goes to open play and just starts like slicing drives, and that takes out someone's eye. That is the worst thing that could happen in pickleball. So I think you're probably under the same impression, but I think pickleball should be more spin oriented, because then you get cooler points, more drawn out points. Like you could still get like, the stuff that we love, the women's doubles, hands battles, maybe a little bit more in men's doubles too, spin. So you get like cool shots around the post. You could whip it around. I think spin is what we should try to maximize for.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like nobody wants there to be somebody lose their eye. I mean, it's already happened at the amateur level, but at the pro level, there'd be a lot more publicity with that. And I feel like the regulatory agencies are there, that they know that it's been an issue, it's a danger, and they're trying to, they found the spot, I feel like, and it's constantly being kind of narrowed down here and there. But I feel like where they're capping power right now at the 0.385 for PPL and the 0.43 for USAP is about, from what I've seen, I don't know exactly for sure where that is, but I feel like it's just right at the Paddletech Bantam level, maybe slightly above. Clearly the sunset paddles like the Gearbox Pro Power Elongated, the mod, and the original Yola Gen 3s are out. So we know that's beyond the limit. And I feel like that's a good call, I think, on the agency's part. And yeah, I love the idea of innovating towards spin. I do think eventually, if you had too much spin, there would be an issue. But right now, it's capped at 2,200 RPM at PPL, and they measure that directly with a high-speed camera and a paddle angled at 30 degrees. They shoot a ball at it, it spins off. And doing that method, like that's, to me, I don't know exactly also where that falls, but I think it's falling at about where on my database I'm getting 2,400 RPM. Just by doing top spin serves. And that's wicked spin. That's like serious spin. You can do crazy trick shots, like you could, not me, but you could rip it around the post and get a good arc with that kind of spin. So I feel like they're on the right track there also.
So do you think foam is here to stay?
I do. It just makes a more pleasant feeling paddle, and it gives you more leverage as a paddle engineer to engineer for sweet spot and the power levels that you want in a paddle that feels better. I mean, I don't think that necessarily polypropylene honeycomb is going away anytime soon, even though it seems like a primitive technology, and it kind of is. It's been developed so long in pickleball, we all are familiar with it, and it actually performs pretty well in a pickleball paddle. But yeah, full foam cores are here to stay, and the composite cores with polypropylene and or other materials plus foam and strategic areas are also here to stay.
Got it. Yeah. Do you think we've maxed out grit and spin, or do you think people are going to continue to crack the code?
I think they're continuing to innovate, and where I'd like to see the innovation is not only good spin, but also durability in the spin, and raw carbon fiber has been the king of the texture for 3 years now, 4 years. I feel like we need to engineer toward more durability on the spin than raw carbon fiber. And we've seen like the nanotech surface from Proton and other friction-based smoother surfaces that provide spin through friction. They are definitely more durable, but there's issues with those too in terms of they play differently in different humidity levels and different elevations. You get more slippage at lower elevations. So I want to see more innovation there, and I'm hoping that soon we're going to see something very innovative in terms of what delivers spin on the paddle that's going to be much more durable than what we're getting today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think durability is huge. I played in a paddle tournament last month, and I was talking to some of the pros there, and I was talking to them about how often they switch their paddles or their rackets, and they said, "Yeah, this will last 1-2 years." I was like,
Right.
"What?"
Yeah.
It's like my paddle lasts. If I'm an amateur, my paddle will last 6 months.
Right.
That's great. And they were like, "Dude, there's no way that it should last that little amount of time." I was like, "Yeah, I swap my paddle every week." And the pros swap their paddle every week. And he's like, "No, we swap ours like never, not even that.
Yeah.
And so the fact that, other racket sports swap their paddles every six months or a year is goes to show like the precedent that's set there versus here, where the fact that amateurs are spending $300 on a paddle just to swap it 3 months later is crazy.
That's pretty obscene. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's differences that can be outlined between paddle technology and racket technology. You're able to change the strings on rackets, and there have been attempts to make replaceable faces on pickleballs, and there are a couple of things on the market right now that allow you to do that. They provide a different feel, though. It's a more muted feel, so it hasn't been adopted widespread yet. But there's also like paddles are just a more destructive. We're hitting a really hard plastic ball with a surface, whether or not it's smooth and tacky or gritty, that's going to wear down pretty quickly. But I feel like the innovation incentive hasn't been there to make it more durable, because if you can sell more paddles, great,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that there's a solution in 2025, or at least a big step forward in terms of delivering good grit that plays well and is more durable.
Mm-hmm. So my last question to wrap it up, picking your brain apart even some more, are there any sneaky under the radar pieces of tech that you have your eye out for?
Let's see. Not so much like totally revolutionary changes. I've been proponents in the past for incorporating Kevlar into paddles before it was there, and I think that was an interesting experiment, and it's a viable alternative to carbon fiber. I think there's room in terms of the materials we're using in the face layup to experiment. I'd like to see more dovetailing with board sports. We've looked at racket sports for so long to build our paddles. Why not look at snowboarding, skateboarding? I mean, there's been a little of that, but I think there's a lot of potential in board sports to bring into pickleball in terms of what materials are they using. And I briefly did some research on snowboards, and they use all kinds of different materials that aren't in pickleball in their layups of the snowboard. And I was like, I'm sure some of that, it's low-hanging fruit. We just haven't realized that it's going to be amazing yet. So I'm a big proponent of introducing, experimenting with new materials in the paddle, including in the core. But otherwise, I think where we are now is worlds beyond where we were a year ago, even in terms of paddle technology. They play so much better today. And it makes me happy that I've been a part of this ride. And I look forward to where it's going the next year.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so it's just John Kew Pickleball. That's on YouTube. I have a website too, and it's spelled JOHNKEW. And the website has my paddle database, and you can really dig deep into all the metrics and the paddles and that. And there's charts, and you can populate radar charts with which are the most powerful paddles or most poppy and spin and all these percentiles. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you for everything you're doing with the sport. And I look forward to seeing where you're headed.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.